Hey everyone, and welcome back to Joey's Retro Handhelds. I'm Joey, and today we're going to be doing a deep dive review into the PowKiddy RK2023 Wi-Fi edition. I think for this review, it makes sense to bring in the RG353PS from Ambernic, as it's the same price and specs as the RK2023, and so, in addition to this being a review, it's going to be more of a comparison as well. And to complicate matters a little bit further, I have the PowKiddy X55, which has the same specs as these as well, but it's a bit larger and has a larger screen with a better resolution. So that'll be coming at some point in the near future as well, not to overcomplicate things any further than they already are. Tangent aside, you're probably here just to see if I like the RK2023. And so if that's all you're here for, then the answer is yes. I think this is a really good device, minus a single caveat, which we'll get into, but I'm really happy and impressed with this and consider it a really good budget handheld. Stay till the end to see if it replaces my RG353PS as my daily go-to device for anything under PS1. The RK2023 Wi-Fi edition has one single color, and that's black. Now, if you wanted the non-Wi-Fi edition, it comes in both black and white, and the black there has these nice cool blue buttons on it that gives it a little bit of a pizzazz, I guess. But unfortunately, this one only comes in black. The PS has white, gray, and purple options, and obviously, as you can see, I picked the purple one. It just looks the best, and I wish that the PowKiddy RK2023 had a few other color options available. Be nice to see something out of the black and white realm, but all we have to work with is this black right now. For anyone new to this space, let's just ignore the specs for the most part. Let's talk about the important things. The first is that both of these devices run Linux only. The RG353PS, however, does have a dual boot variant that runs Android, and it's called RG353P. It's a bit more expensive, but as far as these two devices go, they're only Linux. The second is that both of these can do HDMI out to a TV through their mini HDMI ports, and you can use multiple controllers with them to do some cool local multiplayer. The third is that both of these are perfect for every platform up to and including PlayStation 1, with the bonus consoles in this scenario, if you're willing to do some tweaks and patience, is Nintendo 64, Dreamcast, and PSP. Neither of these will do anything above those consoles. Considering both have the same 640 by 480 screen, which is the perfect 4:3 aspect ratio, they're both well suited for all your older retro games. I'm sure you're probably seeing a theme and a pattern here, but battery life is also the same on both. I've been able to get about 4 to 6 hours on a charge with Wi-Fi on. For boring old specs, that's all there is to say. Here's the tough one. If we go by MSRP, the PowKiddy RK2023 is about $120 MSRP, but it's usually around $85 or less with their coupons and sales. PowKiddy doesn't really sell at MSRP. I actually got mine for $72 US shipped through AliExpress during a sale that they had not too long ago. And so that's also an option for you as well. PowKiddy can get some pretty low prices and deals on their hardware, so keep an eye out if that's something that interests you. On the other hand, the RG353PS is $95 regular price and on sale for $88 give or take. So it's a bit of a range between the two devices depending on where you get it, what sales are going on, what coupons and all that. But for sake of comparison's sake and going by normal sale prices and all of that, they're pretty much the same, with obviously a bit of a kicker going to the PowKiddy RK2023 for just having more options available to you for sales and lower prices. In my review for the PS model, I found the price to be pretty fair for what you're getting, and it's awesome that this comes in a little bit lower on the PowKiddy side, so you get even better prices and a lot more value for what you're getting. I think in both of these scenarios, it's a really good price for what you're offered. But if you're going to measure by just price alone, then the PowKiddy RK2023 would definitely win in this scenario. I'm going to say it right off the bat, but the RK2023 has a more plastic feel than the RG353PS. I don't want to say it feels cheap or anything along those lines, as it's not the right wording for it, but it does feel more like a Fisher Price sort of quality, if that makes sense, and I don't really mean it in a negative sense, but I like that about it. It's really light, it's super comfortable in the hands, and just feels fantastic from an overall perspective. The RK2023 is slightly taller than the PS, but not by much. It's a bit more compact in width by a good margin. It's also not as thick as the RG353 PS. Coming from a perspective where I consider the PS to be one of the more comfortable models out there right now, the RK2023 is basically its equal for that. I couldn't tell you which one I would consider more comfortable or ergonomic, as both are fantastic and number one in my mind. For me, I would love these devices and the 405M to be the template for all further devices, as ergonomics and comfort are my number one priority on all devices. Looking at the face buttons, and I'm super happy that PowKiddy decided to use adult buttons for this, as the larger buttons just feel fantastic to use. I didn't have any issues with buttons on the PS, but I always appreciate larger buttons as they're just more comfortable and it doesn't disappoint on the RK2023. In fact, I don't even know if they're larger. It seems like they are to the naked eye, and I'd have to break out some calipers to test it, but from what I could tell, it seems like they're just a tad larger than the PS model is. They have nice travel to them and stick out nicely and just feel great to use. Moving to start and select buttons, and they're clicky and loud, which is fine, but I do like how the sound is more muted on the PS and not clicky or loud. Analog stick wise, if there's a difference between both, I couldn't tell. It's the usual sticks you see everywhere and are fine for this purpose. Neither of these devices are using Hall effect analog sticks. Okay, let's talk about the caveat. I'm sure it was the first thing you saw and cringed at when you saw this device. I know you did because I did the same thing. It's the D-pad. I was really turned off by it at the start and was like, what in the world is this? And then I booted up some games, and my usual test for D-pad accuracy is Super Mario World or Super Mario World ROM hacks. I decided to boot one up, and I was impressed to see that my jumps and movement were extremely accurate using the D-pad. It didn't really feel bad, it felt fine, and doing my usual Pokemon test to see false diagonals, you can see movements for up and down are perfectly fine, but left and right can be moved in any direction. Or if you want to use a test more people are familiar with, if we boot up Contra, you can see the character moves even when holding down on the D-pad, which isn't great. Now, I don't really play fighting games or anything where this is really a concern for me personally, but if you want a perfect D-pad, then obviously this wouldn't be for you. Now, everything I just said was written in my first draft of this review, because yeah, the D-pad was at first fine. But then I used it more, and I have major issues with the D-pad now. I don't know what it is about 2023 releases for devices and them trying to really hurt us, but this D-pad's edges are sharp enough to hurt your thumb while playing. I didn't experience it at first, and it was only as I started to use the device more and more, and for longer periods, that it started to show up. It went from a device that was super comfortable and easy to use, and I was easily impressed, to one that I'm getting annoyed at frequently due to the D-pad. Take from this what you will. Lastly, let's take a look at the trigger buttons, and it's going to lead us down a little bit of a rabbit hole. You can add these triggers as an instrument in a band, and that's how loud and clicky they are. The PS is muted and you barely hear them, but the RK2023 is super loud for triggers, which also applies to the start and select buttons. But on top of all that, everything rattles. Both top triggers are loose and rattle quite a bit. Not that you'll be using this as a maraca, but even still, it's got a lot of rattling. Overall, both devices are really easy to just play games on, and nothing besides the D-pad stands out as an issue or concern. Out of the box, both devices have extremely good screens. Honestly, I'm pretty impressed with them both and how they look fantastic. Viewing angles are great and colors are great, all of it. For this price point, it's impressive and I have nothing really bad to say. Comparing the brightness of both, and on the absolute lowest setting, they're pretty much the exact same from what I can tell. And on the highest setting, it's the same again. Let's just consider them basically the exact same screens. Now we get to the audio section, and this one does have a clear winner. This is always a tough one to film as it's a little bit hard to get on camera and for audio, so I'm hoping it does come through. But the RK2023 speakers and audio is just great. I can actually feel the audio thump while holding it through the back, which is awesome. And it has a bit of bass to it that makes the audio sound great. There's no crackling or distortion that I found, even at high volumes. I don't even think they did this on purpose, it just happens to sound great. The PS, on the other hand, is good as well. The RK2023 is just better. This isn't really a scenario of one being bad, one being good. It's one being good and one being great. The only improvement I'd make is to have them both front-facing speakers, as right now they're both down-firing. But other than that, it's been perfectly serviceable for their use case. So in summary, both devices are extremely well made, and nothing really here that is going to take you away from that experience. Now, my slight edge is going to go to the PS for having a better D-pad, as well as just being a little bit more on the premium side of things, which again, isn't really a huge negative. But if you're looking for better audio and a little bit more compact and still just as comfortable, then the 2023 is a really good device as well, without the D-pad. So it depends on what's really important to you there. And I realize it's really hard to get that D-pad issue across. You might have to actually try it to get an idea of what I'm talking about, but it is a big concern to me personally. Either way, props to both of these teams for making such comfortable devices, and I'm really hoping that shines through to other manufacturers and other devices as well. The PS ships with Ambernic's stock Linux operating system, which I've personally replaced with the custom firmware from ArcOS. The RK2023, on the other hand, ships with Gelos, or is it Gel OS? Either way, you know what I mean. It's a custom firmware made specifically for this device as they have a partnership. If you installed Gel OS on the PS model, we'd be looking at the equivalent experience from an operating system perspective. But out of the box, the RK2023 is the winner easily. This device has Wi-Fi, so you can use SSH or Samba to just transfer files over. Moving your ROMs and BIOS files are extremely easy. You can see the folders for each platform, and so you just plop your ROMs in the right platform, as well as the BIOS folder, and off you go. If you're confused as to what BIOS and ROM files are, take a look at my retro game ROMs and BIOS video to help you out and give you an idea of where to get started when it comes to getting a ROM and BIOS library up and running. Lastly, just on the topic of Wi-Fi, both Wi-Fi chips in these devices work great and have good signal. I haven't had any issues for signal or transfers on either of these devices. Gel OS is a great operating system with everything you need. I especially like the Retro Achievements collection menu where I can instantly see all my games that have retro achievements. Also, you can create your own dynamic collection of games without retro achievements. These are games that I'll usually play on the go or when I don't have Wi-Fi. Settings wise, I haven't really touched any settings besides adding colorization to Game Boy, because I like having that Game Boy Color feel on Game Boy games. Everything else I found to just work or it's set up properly. There's an experimental sleep mode option in the settings that might work for a deep sleep, although I've seen people talk about it causing issues. Personally, I just shut down the device when I'm done with it, and I'll only use the single press power button to turn off the screen if I'll be back in a few minutes. Otherwise, the battery drain is a real killer on just the single press power button. From an overall software perspective, they're both really the same. There's an edge here towards the RK2023 for shipping with a great custom firmware already in GelOS, so you have that advantage there. But in all honesty, you're probably going to be replacing the SD card anyways, as they're unbranded and low quality. So you're going to have to do those steps in reflashing GelOS anyways. So depends on really what you're thinking to where that software benefit goes. In my mind, it's about the same. I think I might be getting tired of devices with this chip, as it's a similar showcase every time I do it, but here we go. For both devices, they're going to play up to and including PS1 and flawlessly. Nintendo 64 isn't included in this. Running through a showcase of the typical games here and ones that play great, we have Game Boy and Game Boy Color, and yeah, there's obviously not going to be any issues here with these type of games. Jumping into Game Boy Advance, NES, and Super Nintendo, and it's more the same. You also get some really good fast forward speeds for Pokemon fans out there, and that helps a lot. And then we get to PlayStation 1, and compatibility with PS1 games is pretty close to 100%. There might be a few rare titles with issues, but otherwise every platform we've talked about so far will run perfectly fine. These are all the platforms I consider to be the core to this device, and what I would personally buy this for. Now, for the tinkerers out there, we can talk about bonus consoles or the ones that can run, but you either need to be patient with settings, tweaks, or just not a super good performance depending on the game. The first and obvious one that I usually talk about is Nintendo DS. And for obvious reasons, the lack of touchscreen and not having a dual screen. Nintendo DS is a bit of a mixed bag. Performance-wise, games will run just fine. Just find the ones without touch or that second screen not mattering, and you can have a good time here. Dreamcast is playable here as well. It's not perfect or great, but you can get away with some titles. If Dreamcast is a core console to you, I wouldn't get this, and would look at something like the RG405M, as that's where I personally see perfect Dreamcast. And so continuing that thought, the RG405M is also where I see perfect Nintendo 64. Nintendo 64 is a weird one, as you can get away with playing some games here and there, but not all of them. I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but my usual test is Mario Tennis. And if that doesn't run well, which it doesn't here, then I don't consider Nintendo 64 completely playable for the device. But again, if you want to tinker and spend some time changing out cores, settings, and all that, you can get a lot of Nintendo 64 games playable here, like Super Mario 64. It just depends on you. Lastly, some PSP games can run full speed here, and you might get a decent experience, but as a whole, I wouldn't consider this a PSP handheld. Let's wrap it up here with my overall thoughts on pros and cons of this device. For the pros, the price shouldn't be understated. You get a lot of good here for the low price that you can get the RK2023 at. Like I said, mine was $72 US shipped, which is extremely cheap. It's also an extremely comfortable device to hold for long periods of time, and I love the portable form factor. Screen and audio on this are way better than it has any right having, and it makes it a joy to play games on. Lastly, Gel OS being included from the get-go is an awesome addition, and super happy that more people can experience a custom firmware like this right out of the box. On the negative side, the biggest one is the D-pad. I don't think I'm ever going to understand manufacturers and their need to overcomplicate this. It was a roller coaster of emotions with this. From initially confused at the design, to liking it on first impressions, to not even sure if I want to use it again. The triggers are way too loud and they can likely be fixed if you want to open it up, but not everyone wants to do that. Lastly, and it's a bit of a nitpick, but I would have loved to have more color options available. Let's talk about which one of these two I prefer, and then we're going to get into the elephant in the room, which is something else entirely. When I first got the RK2023, after using it for a few hours, I was 100% ready to just be like, I don't need the PS anymore. This will be my perfect daily driver. And it's funny because the PS I just made a video on as my perfect daily driver not too long ago. And so I was really excited and I was super hopeful that this would be the one. But it's the D-pad. I can't get over the D-pad, unfortunately, and it's a big problem. So as of right now, the PS model is still going to be my number one device in this category. Not to say that this is a bad device by any stretch of the imagination. I would highly, highly recommend it. You just need to know what you're getting into with that D-pad, and I'm hoping that you're fine with it, because otherwise PowKiddy has done a really good job with this device. So for right now, the RG353 PS is still going to be my number one handheld for under $100. Although that's going to change, I think, in the next few weeks. So the elephant in the room is the Retroid Pocket 2S. In case you've been living under a rock for a little bit, Retroid announced this device and it's going to be starting at $99 US while having essentially the same processing power as the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus or the RG405M. So you can start to see the dilemma if you're interested in either of the devices we talked about today, especially for $20 more, I guess $18 at the lowest. You can get a lot more device with Hall effect sticks, stacked analog triggers, Android, more RAM, and some cool colors. Jungle Green is just awesome. Obviously, I can't speak for everyone's financial situation, so that extra $18 or around $20 might be a tough pill to swallow for a lot of you, but based on specs alone, and we'll see the rest when I get mine, it's going to be real hard to recommend anything else under $100 with the Retroid Pocket 2S existing. You'll have perfect Dreamcast and Nintendo 64 to add to your list, and that's a hard thing to say no to, especially seeing the performance today. Anyway, it's just a thought for anybody looking at either of these handhelds that you might want to consider that option as well, and we'll see what ends up shaking out when that 2S releases, but my money is that's going to be a top handheld for this year, just based off of everything that we've seen from price as well as the performance and value from it. And that's going to be it for this one. If you like this review, check out my other reviews as well as setup guides and all the other fun stuff that I have on my channel. Share in the comments below. Are you getting either of these devices? Are you waiting for the 2S? What's your thought process? Where are you at? Please don't forget to like and sub to help this channel grow, and hope you all have a good one.